All right, we're here with Drake Souter. He is a SAU alumni, and he is also a cancer survivor. At just 23 years old, he was diagnosed with acute leukemia. At 25 years old now, he is here with us today to share his story and how Be the Match Registry has impacted him and his family. So Drake, how did your diagnosis affect your mental state when you found out you had cancer?
It's never easy. Obviously you have the initial breakdown of, what do you do and how are you gonna handle it and are you gonna be okay? And it kind of turned into, it wasn't like, I didn't have a choice. That's something I kind of had to do. And that's kind of how we looked at it from there on out. And as I went through treatments, it's just like, well, I got to do one more and that's how it is. And once I'm on the other side of it, it'll be better. But until that point, it just kept, it's kind of one of those things. I've kind of been in contact with people after my experience, and kind of told them that's the mindset you have to go into is you can't, or you have to do it. You can't focus on how bad you're going to feel and how this is going to happen. You just have to go in there with the mindset of I'm going to do it, I'm going to beat it, and go on.
Stayed pretty strong throughout the whole thing.
That's the whole. I mean, as long as if my outlook was fine, it kind of radiated around me to everybody else.
What would you tell someone who is going through the same thing you did, whether young, older?
Kind of speaks for the lady I kind of got to know recently. I couldn't. She has a kid, and I couldn't speak to that because I don't have a kid. But it's just something that you just look at, kind of like the first question. You just do it, and I kind of tell them what to expect, and if I can answer questions, by all means, they can ask me whatever they want, and I'll give them a straight up answer. I've always just lived by, whatever happens, happens, and it happened for a reason. And you just can't be down on your situation, and you just have to be as positive and motivating as you can to especially help those around you that are kind of going through it with you. Obviously, as I had my moments, my family obviously, were more upset and, would kind of be down on themselves about it and kind of that stuff. But the better attitude I had toward it, the better it kind of seemed. It didn't lighten the situation, but at least, if I'm joking around laughing, they're not really concerned with, they're also joking around laughing. They're not too worried about the moment.
Where did you receive the transplant from, and did you ever get in contact with the donor?
So I did my transplant at UAMS in Little Rock. There's a rule with Be the Match that if they're within the U.S., you have to wait a year before you can actually know who the person is. If they're out of country guidelines are 2 years. So if I'm in the U.S., they can know who I am after a year. But if they're outside of the U.S., they have to wait 2 years before I know who they are. But you can send an anonymous letter. You can't use names, places, doctors' names, anything that would give who the patient is. You can't give any of that away. But you can kind of anonymously just talk to them and say thank you or whatever. And we've reached back and forth a couple times, and we both mentioned that we're interested in meeting up. Once the 1 year mark comes, which is should be essentially March 12th is when we can meet her. We do know it's a girl. They try to match roughly the same age, so she's around my age. I think she's a year or two older than I am. We do know that she is local because they did a fresh donation. She did a fresh donation, which found out she has to be within 8 hours of the hospital. So she's within 8 hours of Little Rock.
How were you able to pay for treatments and other medical needs and insurance, and was there fundraising involved? So
I'm still under my parents' insurance, which luckily my dad has fantastic insurance. They did do fundraising for me. We paid for anything medical related that we have had to pay has come out of the fundraising money. But honestly, we were very fortunate in the position we were in to have such great insurance. Treatments are astronomically, just super, super expensive. It's just, we're very fortunate have had that opportunity to have such good insurance.
Now that you are cancer-free, would you say that you have trauma from your experience or PTSD, and how do you deal with it?
So I dealt with severe anxiety afterwards, constantly worried if it was going to come back. And I was seeing a therapist for a couple months and talked to her, and I guess I finally just one day realized that it didn't matter in a sense. I was focused on the day in front of me and that day's challenges instead of worrying about future possibilities that may not even happen. And today is not nearly as bad, if at all. It was really a struggle at the beginning, but I've gotten to a point now where I feel like I used to get nervous walking around Walmart. And now, I mean, that doesn't really affect me anymore. And it took a few months, and, you know, obviously everybody's gonna be different. It's obviously, you know, PTSD involved with it, just anxiety involved with it of, you know, what's gonna happen next, or just even during treatments. It's not even after the fact. It could be any time, and you just kind of have to look at it as you got to get through that day. It doesn't matter you got to get through that day, and then the next day you get to the next day. You can't look at it as, oh, I got this appointment in a month, or I got to go back and do chemo in a month or 2 months or whatever. You just got to go day to day.
How did you find out about Be the Match Registry? Did the doctors recommend it, and were you entered into the database?
So we originally tested my sister. She's a nurse at SAU, or she's in the nursing program. They usually go with siblings first. She wasn't a match, so they just went ahead and put me on the next thing. You just go on the registry. You're on the donor list, and at that point they just start matching you, and they use Be the Match for that. So once they already had my HLA typing, which is how they confirm the match. So once they found out she wasn't a match, they just went ahead and put me on the list, and then it was just a matter of whoever was already on the list before they found a match, and kind of walk down the list of people who kind of they rank them by who my doctor thought would be the best person, and then they just kind of go down if stuff comes up, person's sick or can't do it, or, you know, decides they don't want to, or whatever the case may be.
So how long did it take for you to match with the donor?
Well, I think they have a donor meeting every, I don't know, at least every week, if not a couple times a week. And at that point, there's a transplant coordinator that checks the list to see if any donors have come up, and then they'll cycle through the people they have, and then whenever they get to, for me, for example, they would say my name, and if they didn't have anything, they didn't have anything, and then I don't know how long it actually took, but they said for several of the meetings I didn't have any, and then one day they checked it and there were hundreds. So it kind of varies. I mean, some people pop up immediately, some people are still waiting, and, you know, they don't have anybody yet. So it's really, you know, dependent on the person.
So how long did it take you to match?
I would probably estimate, I don't know, a month or so before they actually found me a few people to kind of pick from, and then whenever we went for my appointment one time, they just gave me a list of the top 10 or whatever, however many people they had that were matches, and we kind of got to look over the list. Obviously, I pick them. We at least got to see the list of people and like where they were from, which was, you know, obviously really reassuring for us. It's nice to actually kind of have a plan laid out and have the ability to choose more than one person if need be. We're very fortunate in that fact that I had so many people that like I said before, I think one of the donors they went to had COVID, so they couldn't do it. There's so many stipulations they have, and luckily I had enough choices that, you know, if a couple people or a few people couldn't do it, I still had so many options that it worked out.
Like regarding the transplant process, what was like the step by step?
So as far as donating, it's basically they just you'll basically go like you're giving blood. They'll cycle your blood into a machine. They will pull the stem cells out, and then they'll give you everything else back. So all they're taking is the stem cell. As far as them giving it to me, it's just an IV. It just drips like anything else, like any blood product or saline or anything, and it just drips into me, and it takes about half an hour. It's pretty, it's obviously not painful. It's pretty simple procedure. I mean, obviously I'm not being cut open or having anything actually done. It's just they're infusing something into my arm. As far as my side of it, it was to figure out what kind of cancer you have to do a bone marrow biopsy, which they go on the back of your lower back at your hip, and they just kind of they numb you up, and then they cut a little piece of bone out, and they pull the liquid bone marrow out, and then they don't tell them what state, like what level of cancer you have, and they don't have stages for leukemia. It's low, medium, and high risk, and then it'll tell you what leukemia you have, how much of leukemia you have in your body, and the mutations that you have, and kind of they will give them a guidance of how to go about your treatment.
So did you have multiple procedures?
The bone marrows, yes, I've had probably 9 or 10, and then I'll do one more in March. So in a month or so, I'll do another one. But I have been asleep for the other ones. I've only been awake for one.
What's the purpose of doing multiple treatments? Well, multiple procedures.
So originally they did the procedure to figure out what kind of leukemia I had. They knew I had leukemia, had to figure out there's 4, of the different kinds, which one I had. So whenever they measured it, it was about 20% leukemia blast, which is how it's, obviously it's a percentage, so it's how it's measured. But I was starting I think around 20%, and then after my first round, I did my first round of chemo, I did another one so I could see how the first round of chemo affected me and how much it knocked down my leukemia. And it went down to 5%. And then it's kind of dependent on the person again. You may do another round or another 2 rounds, or you may do a bone marrow after each round of chemo. I think I did one more round, do another bone marrow, and then did 2 rounds, do another bone marrow, do another round, do another bone marrow. And then after your stem cell transplant, you do a bone marrow at day 30 after your transplant. So 30 days after your transplant, you do a bone marrow. You do one at day 100, and then you do one at 1 year post your transplant.
So they're basically like checkups.
Essentially, it's like if you ain't got a scan done for any other cancer, it's the same thing. It's how they check your cancer development and if you got better or worse.
Is there a chance of your cancer coming back?
I hope not. That was kind of the whole, I guess, the benefit of doing the stem cell transplant is I'm essentially, somebody's giving me their stem cells, so they're killing all of my stem cells entirely and then replacing them with a donor. So effectively, it would never come back. I mean, I guess there's always a chance, I don't know percentage wise, or, I guess it could always, I guess whenever it takes, it's engrafting, so I guess it could always reject it at some point. I was on rejection medicine for several months. I've since been off of it for a while now. They kind of hold you onto it for a little bit, and then they wean you off of it. But I guess there is always a chance it could come back. I don't know what that would be though.
Okay. Why do you think anyone should register for Be the Match?
It just gives people in my situation another opportunity to, I guess, go through life normally. It doesn't always guarantee that you're gonna match with somebody. You could be on there forever, never match with anybody. And even if they decide that, you could always just be on there, and if it's not a good time for you, whenever they call you, you can always tell them you can't do it. I mean, they're not gonna force you to hold you down and pull your stem cells. I mean, they're not gonna do that to you. So it's kind of up to the person. I mean, just getting put on the registry doesn't do anything. It doesn't hurt you in any way. It doesn't. I mean, it takes 5-10 minutes to do, and then you're just on there, and then if you're needed, then they'll call you. If not, then all you did was give up 5-10 minutes to potentially save somebody else's life.
Drake, we appreciate you coming and sharing your story with us today.
Appreciate it. Thank y'all.